What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
What goes wrong? Why not attach the end of the steering rod directly to the hub pivot arm? It seems like it would be cheaper without the extra part, the hub lug. Cheaper, yes, but definitely not better. First of all, the length of the lug adjusts the front wheel alignment angle. You would still have to adjust the length of the tie rod somehow, so you can't do without an additional adjusting element. Secondly, the wheels constantly endure all the difficulties of the road, potholes, bumps and everything else. All these shocks are transmitted to the tie rod. If there were no lug, the tie rod would become a consumable item and the repair would be much more expensive. Because the tie rod costs more than a small and relatively simple lug, and it is much more difficult to change it. So, in fact, it turns out that with a lug the operation of the machine is both easier and cheaper. The steering rod tip is really arranged in a simple way. The basis of everything is the body of the ball joint. On one side it is just installed, on the other side there is a thread on which the tip is screwed onto the steering rod. What can break here? In general, only the ball joint. In the most neglected, but fortunately also the rarest case, the pivot pin breaks. This is the most unpredictable and dangerous breakage. In this case the wheel turns out and the machine loses steering. And it is very good that in real life it is very difficult to face with it. Much more often the joint gradually wears out. More precisely, the joint liner wears out. It's usually made of Teflon. Over time, it becomes thinner and the pin begins to play in the body. And this is usually the reason for the need to replace the tie rod lug. The cost of the tie rod lug is not very high, and its replacement at first glance is very simple. You need to unscrew the nut that attaches the pin to the hub pivot arm, and on the other side, just unscrew the lug from the tie rod. However, many people either don't do this at all, or don't do it quite right. Knock, knock, who's there? One of the reasons for postponing replacement is some difficulty in diagnosing the lug. It is very successfully disguised under other parts of the chassis, and it is not always clear that it is necessary to change it. Of course, if you have a hoist at hand, a pit does not help very well. It is quite easy to find the backlash in the tie rod lug. You can even hang the wheel on a jack, which will also help to find the backlash. But we must be honest, hardly any of modern drivers will pull out the jack with delicate hands to understand what is knocking down there. All the more that the tip is the last thing to be remembered. Much more often they try to blame the cause of knocking on stabilizer struts, in extreme case, on ball bearings. There is indeed a logic in it. For example, both of them fail more often. And the symptoms of breakage are very similar. On them we will stop a little more detailed. The wear of the tie rod lug manifests itself in different ways. There may be a slight knocking noise, reduced response to steering, and the car is worse on the road. The trouble is that exactly the same symptoms will occur when the stabilizer bars are worn out and when the ball bearings are badly worn out. Therefore, the best way to check the condition of the steering rod lugs is to check the backlash on the hoist. Especially with this should not be delayed if in addition to the above signs appeared unhealthy recoil in the steering wheel when passing bumps. This is a clear indication of a defective lug. And if you suddenly see that on one of them torn dust cover, it will have to be replaced in any case. And there are subtleties here, too. Lubrication, length, angles. As I said before, the tie rod lug is used to adjust the offset angle of the wheels. To keep it the same, a long time ago they came up with a simple way of replacing the lug. You need to count how many turns it was screwed on the rod and screw the new lug on exactly the same number of turns. Theoretically, the total length of the rod with the lug will remain the same, which means that the angle of convergence will not change. Alas, that method does not always work well. It was more or less acceptable when instead of the factory VAZ lug, the same new factory VAZ lug was put in place. The keywords are the same. And now it is not always possible to buy exactly the same lug. Because, firstly, they are not always available, and secondly, there are almost always dozens of non-original parts of very decent manufacturers. This is good, but it is bad that the length of such tips can be slightly different from the length of the one you have to change. And then you have to change by the number of turns on which the new part is screwed. It goes without saying that it is an impossible task for an ordinary person to adjust the alignment by eye. As a result, it can become even worse. The car will not drive well, but will start to eat tires. Therefore, it is better to forget about the method of counting turns and after replacing the lug to go to a normal stand to set the alignment and camber. And by and large, this procedure should be done at least once every 2 years with the control of angles during seasonal rewiring. However, almost no one does this in our country. The second point is the lubricant that should be under the anther. If you buy a tip is not very conscientious manufacturer, you can see that the lubricant under the dust cover cotton apicalical. This means that the ball joint will not last long, the Teflon insert will wear out very quickly. In this case it makes sense to add grease, but it is not always clear what kind. Usually for this purpose the simplest Lidl 24 is used. It is, of course, better than nothing, but little has one disadvantage: it does not affect the rubber duster in the best way. The duster swells, loses its shape, quickly tears, dirt gets into the joint and there you go. Of course, if the tip is of good quality, the dust cover will be made of silicone or neoprene and nothing terrible will happen. They are not afraid of little, but good tips usually have good lubrication. Instead of little, it is better to use at least Schwab 4 or Sidem 201. The latter, however, is quickly washed out by water, but if the anther is intact, the tip will serve longer with it than with little. Well, the best thing is to buy a special grease for joints on calcium or barium base. These greases are more expensive, but if the cost of a new tip is high, the cost of a good grease will be justified. By the way, all of these greases are great not only for tie rod lugs, but also for ball joints. Why and why? We are left with one last question: is it possible to prolong the life of the lug? You can, but by and large it still falls into the category of expendables. Especially for those who often drive on bad roads. As a ball joint, the lug does not like shocks, so racing on pits can destroy it even for 10,000 kilometers. Also, turning the steering wheel on a stationary car greatly reduces the life of the lugs. In this case, they experience increased loads. There is nothing new here either. It has always been a bad habit to turn the steering wheel while standing still. The habit of climbing curbs, especially with the wheels turned out and diagonally, causes significant harm. However, there is nothing new here either. The same habit kills first of all the struts and bushings of the transverse stability stabilizer, so it is better to get rid of it. Lastly, a tip with a torn dust cover dies very quickly. It is a personal matter to change the dust cover immediately after its death is detected or to wait until it is time to change the whole tip. However, you should always remember that it is not only unpleasant, but also dangerous to drive a car with a defective steering linkage. In conclusion, while a broken steering rod lug may seem like a minor issue, it can lead to significant safety concerns if not addressed promptly. By understanding the common signs of breakage and knowing how to inspect your steering system, you can ensure a safer driving experience. Regular maintenance and vigilance can help you catch these little problems before they escalate. Remember, staying informed and proactive is key to keeping your vehicle in top condition. Thank you for watching and drive safely.